everyone. Welcome back. It's time for another episode of the Difference Makers podcast, where I, your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, am trying to take you on a journey where we're merging expertise, inspiration, and thought leadership all at one time for people making a difference. And today I have two very special guests with me. Special to me because they are into something that I'm into, which is conservation and wildlife management, especially at the level of trout. Like, that's my favorite. So today my guests are Phil Hirshiman, who's the owner of Colorado Pond and Lake, and his cohort and bestie, we'll call him bestie, we'll learn more about him in a minute, Mr. Noel Browning. And these two are experts in water management, watershed management, and pond installation, and most importantly, environmental conservancy and managing that most precious resource that we have, water. So guys, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Hey Jim, thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know what's cool about this is where we met, right? I was at the Outdoor Sportsman's Expo, and what you guys had going on there was so intriguing to me that I just had to stop. I got pulled like a magnet over to it. I was seeing some of the pictures and some of the things you guys were doing, and it was just a pleasure for me to get 5 minutes of understanding what you guys do. And that 5 minutes led me to say, would you be on the show and talk about the very special and unique things that you guys do? So tell us a little bit about what you guys do as Colorado Pond and Lake.
Absolutely. So we are a private consulting company that really focuses on proactive management and water quality control. That leads into a lot of different things as far as algae control, vegetation control.
What drew you in? Fish stocking?
Fish stocking,
and fisheries management,
nutrient control, aeration systems. There's a lot of different ways you can improve water quality, and we do them all.
And I think it's important to jump in right there, actually, Noel, because a lot of people would say, okay, and, right? I mean, people understand that we need water, that it is the source of life, but I don't know that they get that water management. They think of, I turn on the tap, I do that. Unless you're into the outdoors, you just think turn on the water and it's all good, which, some people might even debate that at the quality of our water. But let's talk about from where you guys live and the perspective you have on water. When it comes to a property, first of all, what kinds of properties get ponds and lakes and that kind of thing?
Fantastic question, because we really deal from anything to municipalities all the way to just your backyard pond. Mm-hmm. And so you have different goals aligned with different resources. So your backyard pond, we want to make it fishable. We want it to look pretty. Municipalities, reservoirs, something on several hundred acres. The goal is different. It's more functionality. One that Noel can speak really well to in that regard is we see a lot of invasive weeds, fouling, water pumping operations, disturbing recreational activities on these large reservoirs. And that's something that we've been heavily involved in correcting.
So that's really important, because now we're talking about not something that you guys put in. You don't put in these ponds. These things are already here, but they're not being managed to the level that allows for the ultimate usage of the water and even safety for that matter. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. And so how do you guys do that?
Just to go back to your point of just my perspective of it, and how people are kind of like ignorant to where their water comes from, and kind of how tenuous our situation is in the arid West, especially in urban metro Denver. All these bodies of water are artificial. They're catchment basins to provide water for people. And they have multi-use for fishing and recreation. But in Colorado, we are dealing with a looming scarcity issue. There's more people every day and less water every day. So it's going to come to a head, and the quality is kind of always somewhat degrading.
I've been wondering about that.
Like people, it's like, you just spray algae and weeds, we like to think larger scale of that. Like, this is important what we do. We're protecting all the uses as far as recreation, drinking,
Are you guys tied
irrigation.
Are you tied with municipalities and governmental agencies in order to help assure quality water into the future and the amount of water? Because one of the biggest things that I worry about is urban sprawl with people coming in and the growth. And I asked in economic development, group here in one of our local municipalities. I said, listen, before you just build, do you have to get a water permit to make sure there's enough water coming down, that growth is limited by projected water sources, not current? And, so I heard the answer that they had, but is that part of what you guys are into as well?
We're not too much into water rights. We really rely on attorneys that specialize in that. The state's really improving on the regulation in that regard, especially for new properties, new wells. Really how many wells you can put on a certain amount of acres based on productivity of the aquifer. That's really kind of outside of our wheelhouse.
Gotcha.
We rely
You're
on...
keeping it clean.
We're keeping it clean.
But there is, just speaking on it, directly, we don't really deal with like development rights or anything, but just knowing, to your point, that when they develop these, the water rights are pretty tenuous too. I mean, I won't name the development near Chatfield, but because I don't want to get in trouble. But man, their water rights situation is pretty tenuous, and they're piping it from up here pretty much by North Glen all the way out there. And
wow,
they have all sorts of secondary water rights and stuff. So if I were to be purchasing a house out there, no one is, to the original point, no one knows that, if this really comes to a head, all your rights are going to be junior, and your tap might be dry.
So now let's take it from that, because that's probably a whole nother conversation with someone who's into that, and that's something that I'm really interested in. So I'm going to follow up on that. But with you guys,
that's outside of our our company that we're getting too zoomed out.
We can kind of piggyback on the other facet of that question, though, as far as urban sprawl, is more people, more nutrients, more impervious surfaces that are going into the point that Noel made earlier, man-made resources that don't have natural barriers or mechanisms to absorb these nutrients. And so we're fighting it in real time in the resource rather than having these control measures.
Are you guys, if someone is building, who is a customer for you? Because it might be that one of these places, you've seen these developments now, because when I first met you, I thought of, we have a couple acres, and what would it take to put a pond on it, and where would it go, and how would it work so that I could put some trout in it, and that. But
which
now,
is something we do.
Yeah. And that's what we got to start talking about.
Right,
what I'm thinking now is, if a development is going in and they want a water feature for their community, there's a lot that has to go into that, right? Like, how do you guys serve that?
It's usually not they want the water feature. It's usually a retention pond.
Okay.
Because they just took away all the absorption value of the land, probably took away a couple wetlands, and they need to replace that with something that can catch all this water.
So they would ask you guys
literally out front in your parking lot.
Yeah.
You have one, which is a perfect example.
Yes.
I've been driving by that for years. You guys need help there too.
And it used to have fish in it, I understand. I just talked to a guy the other day who said he used to catch like 50 plus bluegills and perch out of there a day. So anyway, long time ago.
No, of course. But so oftentimes they need to put in these just for urban drainage and the civil engineering side. And I kind of always chuckle because they will, build these communities. They have to put in a storm water retention pond, but then they'll call the community, reflection shores or whatever, make it look cool and make it seem like this retention pond is an amenity to the community, which it can be. But then the expectations for the community is like, hey, they told us we could paddleboard on this and fish. And it's like, well, it's a catch basin for all of this above you. And the water quality isn't suitable for that. Yeah. So that's kind of where we see that a lot, and it's good for business.
Yeah, I'm sure. So if we take it from that perspective of trying to maintain something that's been there to putting in a new pond, when someone decides to put in a pond, what are the typical reasons that they want to do that? Obviously, there's a recreational reason. Are there other reasons why people want to establish a pond on their personal property?
It's usually,
aesthetics.
It's usually recreation and aesthetics.
Okay.
It's the main way. There's some fire suppression up in the mountains that it makes it easier to do from a water rights standpoint. Mm-hmm. The state's pretty averse to you being like, I want to put in a well and put it on the surface, because then you open it up to evaporation and stuff. So they don't want that usually, but if you say, hey, I'll let this be a fire suppression pond, if there's a forest fire, you guys can come pull water out of it with a helicopter, or they have the systems where you can pump out.
Okay. Now, if you add a pond on a property, is that pond now, does it change the ecosystem significantly of that area? In other words, for different kind of wildlife species, insects, because I would imagine if you put water, you get mosquitoes, and so then you got to put things in that eat mosquitoes, right? Bugs or whatever things, or trout or something that eat mosquitoes. Is that how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a cascading effect. A lot of people, more in rural areas, will build little ponds just to attract elk and deer for hunting. And then, there's a lot of invertebrate interactions, and then it, cascades down to, or up, I guess I would say, to small mammals. And
so when you do that, do you have to think of putting in larvae of different insects? Do you have to stock the environment with all of the things that take care of the other things?
That's a great question.
In some circumstances we will, but mostly it's amazing the vector of a bird. Birds will introduce essentially the micro ecosystem, and then if we're stocking this as a recreational resource, then we'll devise a larger food chain. But we really don't have to introduce much of the microfauna or flora.
Okay,
it is incredible. Yeah, I mean, we'll build a pond, and people will be like, "Well, now we got to plant, cattails, reeds, and all." It's just like, just wait, it will show up.
Amazing.
Birds and wind.
Birds and wind.
Yeah, it finds its way.
I was
life finds a way.
That.
So
life finds a way, right?
And then, eventually down the road, they'll have some aquatic vegetation problem. Like, where did this come from? I just built this. Just like you said, birds or whatever.
And how do you guys manage that? That's one thing. Like, I'll drive by ponds and I'll see that there's aeration systems that are going. Is that something that goes year round? Like, if there's ice on the thing, does it still aerate? How do you keep a pond clean? What's the process?
So there's 3 different ways we can kind of manage a pond, and that's biological, or I'll start with mechanical because you mentioned it.
Aeration systems.
Yeah, mechanical would be like an aeration system,
or manual removal,
pond skimming, something like that.
Okay.
There's biological, which would be like stocking fish,
grass carp.
Yeah, like
minnows are great mosquito mitigators.
Yeah, manipulating the biological environment in some way, whether it be invertebrates, fish. And then there is
chemical.
Okay. Is that probably the least desired if you had to pick of the 3?
It's the last tool we like to use in the box, but it serves its purpose. And the way that we apply chemical, and that also doesn't just preclude by the term to just being pesticide. We can use biological chemicals as well that are
which kind of falls under the biological too.
Sure.
We can put it's like beneficial bacteria that they use in, like, say, wastewater lagoons. We use that same technology in freshwater ponds to kind of shift that biome into positive growth, not negative growth. And I will say just real quick too, because it was kind of baked into the question too, like, and I put it last, right? The chemical approach, right? And everyone is, when you say that word, it's immediately people think like skull crossbones,
poison.
Silent Spring, DDTs, and I get that, and there has been obviously a lot of tragedies because of chemicals like that, but the technologies have come a very long way, and they are all very rigorously tested. So, we wouldn't be putting anything out that's not going to benefit the environment of your pond or in general. That's not what we do. So,
and also another aspect of that is that chemicals a lot of times a retro response rather than being proactive. And so we prefer to get things set up, especially if we're building a new resource, and design in such a manner that we're already doing proactive measures to minimize or mitigate those other issues where we would frankly need to use pesticides.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, it's gotten too far out of control because of other unnatural things. That's another thing too. People are like, chemicals are unnatural. It's like, so is this pond is artificial. So is everything that's happening upstream of it. So I mean, it's kind of.
Well, speaking of upstreams, one of the things that you always think about with an isolated body of water is stagnation, right? If you don't have flow in or you don't have flow out, a body of water will tend to get stagnant. How is that managed? Is that through the aeration system that keeps that going so that you don't have to do that?
Right. Yeah. So aeration systems there's kind of a misconception that they're injecting air and oxygen into the lake. What they're actually doing is circulating it. All of a lake's oxygen comes from the atmosphere, the vast majority of it. So what we're trying to do is expose that entire water column to the atmosphere and to get it as high oxygen as possible. In oxidative environment, a lot of your problems are solved.
For sure.
And degassing as a second fold, like relieving carbon dioxide and harmful gases like hydrogen sulfide that build up in the benthic bed layer.
And does the aeration do that too? It adds in and it takes out.
Yes.
Adds in oxygen, takes out
it's
gases.
just by virtue of the same circulation.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Like you were saying, just keeping that water turning over, it kind of has the effect of a stream in, stream out. You know, we want the water moving as much as possible usually, and it depends on the goals. You asked earlier, do they run 24/7 during the winter? It depends. Some people want to ice skate, so we turn it off in the winter.
I see.
Or run it selectively. And that's a good thing to bring up too, as far as especially for managing a fishery where somebody's not trying to ice skate on it or play hockey. We want to keep that water open at least to a degree, so that there is that atmospheric exchange through the winter.
Right.
And so that's one of the crucial tools in achieving fisheries health throughout the winter is the bubble action from the aerator won't let ice form above it.
Right.
One analogy I always use is like when a lake freezes over, it's essentially holding its breath until spring because you can get a little oxygen through it through photosynthesis if the ice is clear and you get some light penetration. You get phytoplankton, vegetation, photosynthesizing, giving a little oxygen, but once it's like snow covered, it's holding its breath. So that's when you see like shallower ponds, and that's when you see winter kills.
Right.
It only takes 15 minutes of sagged oxygen, and all your fish are gone. So.
And that's what we were talking about earlier. For those of you that are watching or listening, is when it comes to fisheries, they can be very sensitive. And when you talk about a winter kill, that's where the fish don't get the nutrients, oxygen, et cetera, that they need, and they die. And that makes me think of in the fishing world, we can fish all year. For example, if we go to a tailwater, such as if you go to below Root Eye and fish the frying pan or something, right, you're fishing that warmer water because the lake turns over, right? So that the warmer water is now at the bottom as opposed to at the top in the summer. How deep does a pond or lake have to be before it's deep enough to turn over versus just freezing all the way to the bottom?
Oh yeah, well lakes won't really freeze all the way to the bottom.
Okay.
To get thermal stratification happens at very low or shallower ponds. Like a backyard pond. When you're swimming in it and your toes are cold. That's thermal stratification, but. Or you dive down, say 8 feet, and it's a lot colder, right? So that happens pretty quick. And then, in the spring when that flips, that's a turnover. So it can happen at pretty shallow depths. And just to tie into that in general, to like your best chance of avoiding winter kill is having a third of your lake over about 12 feet deep, because then that lower shallower section holds oxygen better because it's colder water holds oxygen better, So that's just kind of
that
a
makes
rule of
sense.
thumb we use if we're like building a pond.
Try to keep one section at that 12 foot, a third of it.
Yeah, minimum. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many factors that.
Well, how long does it take? Give me the short version of the process of from flat ground. Someone says, I want to put in a blank. You have to decide how big and all that kind of stuff. But once you decide that, what's the process of creating a lake from nothing?
It's pretty quick, honestly.
Okay.
And that's provided that you have all your water rights secured and all that. But just physically, just come out with an excavator, remove material. Ideally, we're able to spread material on the property without having to remove it. Come back with a liner.
And what's the liner made out of?
It depends, but for something like this example, we'll just say synthetic plastic liner.
And will that last forever, or does the liner go bad and leak and then the water starts to seep into the ground?
It will last as long as you and I.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
it's a lifetime warranty.
Yeah,
They've come a long way.
Yeah, they cover it with like geotextile and other natural materials.
Okay.
And depending on the geology, you might not even need a liner.
If it's
rock.
around
Colorado, you kind of usually do, but
So you lay this liner down, then what happens?
it's like plastic welded together, and there's like a lock trench at the top, and then it's covered with topsoil and filler up pretty much.
And do you fill it up with just using tap water? Like what? How do you
usually-
truck in a water
Well,
source?
yeah, it's usually a well, or some sort of stream diversion.
Yeah, if there's no spring or stream, then typically well.
Yeah.
But there has to be some sort of inflow, right? Or you'd have to keep adding water because of evaporation, or how do you keep the thing
Right.
consistent?
With the well, yeah, there'd be a level sensor, so it would just automatically kick on and kind of top it off as it evaporates.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Does it bring more birds of prey
Oh yeah.
around? Because I know at a fish hatchery,
We do when we stock fish.
yeah,
They know. They somehow.
They just know.
Blue
herons
We
are-
joke they follow our truck around because it's amazing how, like, a fish or a pond will be like fishless for 10 years, right? They'll be like, I haven't had fish in here in 10 years. I just bought the house, whatever. And we'll stock it, and the next day, herons. It's like how.
That fast, the herons
Yeah,
will be there.
we're not bird people, but I'm sure there's.
Especially at altitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, do they check on them all the time?
Right.
You know,
Right.
There's got to be some.
It's
sense.
fascinating. I was at a place fishing this kind of a private property place where they had some lakes and a stream. It's called Rainbow Falls up off of Bike Deckers
I've
up
been
there.
Yep.
And they had a fish hatchery there.
Yep.
And the guy told me when he first bought it, there was no covering over the waterway of the hatchery.
Oh, yeah.
He said overnight he had just put in thousands of dollars of fish. Overnight they were gone. Like they
Yeah.
got wiped out. So he learned a valuable lesson in buying that.
Yeah.
On how, like you say, those birds somehow they come in and they figure that out. I was
Yeah.
blown away by that.
Yeah. Other even herons, otters will eat an incredible amount of fish in a short period of time. I've even heard of raccoons, coyotes,
bears.
Okay.
bears for sure. Yeah, I
Wow.
saw a video of Montana of a mountain lion fishing too.
Wow.
Which is, I don't think they've seen that before.
No.
I think it was last year. It was in a stream in a hatchery, but
Yeah, I've never seen even
you
heard
know,
of that.
life will find a way.
Life finds a way. And so when you guys are looking at putting in fish, then at that point, is it something that you talk to the person, the owner, and you go, okay, look at this pond or lake is XYZ number of acres
Yep.
that can support this kind of stuff? Do you want multi-species? Do you just want one species? Or do you always need multi-species to kind of keep each
Yeah.
other in check? How do you go through that process?
You essentially nailed it. It's really in that scenario like what your goals are. So if you want trout, we would work up a stocking density recommendation based on the physical characteristics of the pond, and then go back and say, okay, we could do this many rainbow, this many tiger, this many brooks or browns if you want to have diversity, and then we're going to recommend that we stock minnows or some kind of forage population in this example. Noel, you could talk to larger
Yeah.
stockings on the
Yeah, I
scale
mean-
like reservoirs.
Yeah, so yeah, just kind of like warm water species too. There's kind of just like there's some normal species that are always available, like largemouth bass, bluegill, and like fathead minnows, right? So those are kind of just like a general food web that we like to do, and we do that at certain ratios to each other, to make sure that, if you put in the same amount of bluegill and bass, those bluegill are going to be gone immediately. So you want to stock, like a 50-to-1 or something like that, where there's going to be enough bluegill to survive predation, to reproduce, and then same thing cascading down to the minnows, enough to survive predation, reproduce. So then hopefully we just stock it once, and you guys have, without harvest and other birds. But
that's
the goal is to be self-sustaining. I mean, with trout, it's different because they can't spawn in ponds and lakes.
But that's another interesting part of fisheries management is, once again, Noel, you could speak better to this than I can, but as far as coming back and surveying and making sure the populations have actually held the desired numbers and that we're still balanced, and then take corrective action from there. If
I see.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we can go at any time, whether we stocked it or not, and do surveying through different methods. It's usually gill nets or electrofishing. And then we can check those ratios the same way, using deduction kind of, sampling.
Extrapolate the numbers.
Extrapolation. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Stratified random sampling. So we can check those ratios, predator-prey ratios. And then we can also tell body condition using length and weight measurements, and see essentially how they're eating. So you can be like, hey, all your bass are super skinny. And it's usually directly correlated to those ratios of predator to prey. So then we can manipulate that population by like, you need to either start harvesting bass of this size or stock more bluegill, or there's all sorts of different scenarios.
And do you guys notice a big change or evolution in the technology that you use in what you do? We've talked already about some of the chemicals. They've come a long way. You're always looking to make sure that those are healthy. Aeration systems, I'm sure, probably change. I don't know if you use any kind of infrared or has the technology evolved in lake and pond management?
That's a great question.
It is, and surprisingly, yes, because it's not a young industry. But no, new technology comes out every year, and some of it is bunk. We could talk about ozone.
There is a lot of snake oil.
Nanobubbles and stuff that people will sell as quick solutions, but new technology that, even though being new, we could say it's scientifically sound and tried and tested, at least in like the manufacturer's settings before putting on the market. Oxygen saturation technology is a different type of aeration system that's been coming out lately, and the idea of that is basically to change the dynamic for larger reservoirs or resources where you don't want to break the stratification of a lake, that density,
those temperature differences.
So you, in this circumstance, you're actually pumping in pure oxygen, and by doing that in such fine, so it's soluble, so it doesn't create bubbles and disrupt that layer, that stratification.
Got it.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're fighting's a lot in water quality issues is bottom release. So of course there's like say phosphorus is coming in through runoff, right, through people's lawns, whatever. That's external loading. There's also a big degree of internal loading, which is from the pond sediments, and that is really at risk of happening when you're at very low oxygen at the bottom. So by employing technology like that, which is, there's different types of it. They've been doing it for years, like species cones and stuff like that. But that is a way to, if you hyper oxygenate the bottom of a lake, it essentially caps it, and it solves a lot of water quality issues, especially on a reservoir scale. Like a lot of our local Colorado reservoirs are dealing with that, and there's some, Aurora Reservoir has been dealing with they have an oxygen saturation, and it's shown amazing results.
Good. So I think one of the most important things that you guys do, for what I've taken away from this, is this connection of making sure that urban water sources are professionally and appropriately managed so that they can be safe for not only the inhabitants of the water body, but also for the people that engage in either recreational activities or drinking that water. It seems to me like that's a big role of what you guys do. Is that accurate as a company?
Absolutely. That's definitely our mission, is to, make the water the best quality for all of the stakeholders involved. There's a lot of stakeholders, so, agricultural, just people's home use, irrigation, recreation, wildlife. So
just enjoy living in Colorado, damn it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And there's not much of it, so we better take care of what we have.
We got to take care. Yeah, it's not a limitless supply.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as we wind up, I'd like to know from you guys, what is it that you most get from doing what you do emotionally, from an engagement process? Why this? Because you guys are obviously both bright guys, do your thing. You've chosen this to be making your dent on the world through this. How does this do that?
Absolutely. I would say it is a really rewarding profession when you can see a project through, when it's
tangible.
Yeah, presented with a unique problem, and you really have to think of, we're not selling copiers here. We gotta think of a unique solution. So, day to day, every day is different. That's great for mentally.
And every resource is different, so we kind of have I don't want to necessarily say blanket approach, but you kind of know your basic tools that you're going to tackle a problem with, but there's like the forensic or problem solving aspect that's extremely rewarding. Getting to work outside, at least partially, not so much this time of year.
Yeah, something we've been getting better at is doing just like before and after pictures of just like, hey, this is when we started, and it really helps people see that what we do is important, useful, and effective. So
absolutely. Well, it's been a great pleasure for you guys to have you on. I mean, I feel much more educated on this topic, and it brings home to me the importance of water management, water conservation, even as far as I hope people watch and listen will take this, like, how can I apply this even if I don't have a water resource in my home or my property or whatever? You're part of the issue or you're part of the solution. And, how long are your showers? What do you do this? Are you clean with that? Are you thinking about it? And so I hope this has opened the eyes and the minds of a lot of people to start thinking about water in a new way, from a new perspective. If people wanted to get a hold of you to talk about either putting in a pond, managing their pond, asking you more questions, learning about what you do, wanting to help out in some way, how would they do that?
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity. You can either, the easiest way to find us is just go to our website. It's www.copondandlake.com. And from there, you can have your choice of, if you're phone shy, you could just send us an online submission on the contact us page, or just pick up the phone and call us from there. Your preference.
We'll be here for sure.
Awesome. Well, everyone watching and listening, I hope you enjoyed the show today. It was a fascinating dive into water, no pun intended there. But if you enjoyed this, please make sure to share this with someone. Get the word out about our podcast, what we're trying to do. Like us, all the things to do. You guys are way more social media savvy than I, but follow us, engage, like us. We would really appreciate, because it's things like this that allows us to have people like this on our show and really making a difference. So until next time, enjoy your day, and you too, go make a difference.